What would you do if you were the CEO of a large company and you decided to walk into one of your own stores without anyone knowing who you are? This was the question Terence Hall asked himself when he decided to embark on a bold experiment, to walk into one of his own retail stores. But this time, he wouldn't be the famous CEO. He would be just an ordinary customer, unknown to anyone. No sharp suit, no expensive watch, just a simple baseball cap and a hoodie. He wanted to test whether his company, a retail empire worth millions, still upheld the values he had painstakingly built. Terence had heard complaints about service quality in some of the stores, about the lack of enthusiasm from staff, and reports of discriminatory attitudes. He didn't want to hear it just from reports. He wanted to experience it firsthand, to see everything through the eyes of a real customer. But what he was about to experience turned out to be a shocking revelation, one that would forever change how he viewed his own company. With a mix of nervousness and determination in his eyes, Terence stepped out of his car and made his way toward the store. At that moment, he was no longer CEO Terence Hall, the man who made powerful decisions. He was just an ordinary man, ready to face a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Terence felt a bit anxious as he entered the store, but he knew this was an important experiment. In his casual outfit, he looked nothing like the famous CEO he was. As he stepped inside, he was overwhelmed by the bustling atmosphere. Employees were working diligently. Customers were walking briskly between the aisles. Though not the flagship store of the company, this was still one that carried the unmistakable imprint of the empire he had built from the very beginning. He looked around, feeling a sense of pride in what he had created, but also a growing unease in his heart. He began to move through each section, trying to observe the actions of the staff, without letting them realize who he was. It was as if he had become a part of the world he had built, but this time he wasn't the creator of it. He was just an ordinary customer. Terence decided to start his journey in the electronics section, where the store displayed the latest technology products. He stood near a counter, examining a pair of Bluetooth headphones he was considering purchasing. Despite standing there for a while, no employee approached him to offer assistance. A young staff member was absorbed in his phone, completely unaware of Terence's presence. Terence tried to step closer, attempting to strike up a conversation, but the employee merely glanced at him lazily before returning to his phone screen. After a moment, Terence began to feel frustrated. Not only was there a lack of attention, but the employee's attitude was downright disrespectful. He tried to remain patient, but after standing even closer, the employee finally asked, in an indifferent tone, "Do you need anything?" Terence felt a sense of disappointment, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. Perhaps the employee was simply busy, or maybe he didn't realize who Terence was. Dissatisfied with his initial experience, Terence continued to observe. A white couple approached the electronics section, and immediately another employee greeted them with a bright smile. This staff member was incredibly warm and enthusiastic, asking if they needed any help, even going into detail about the product features. Terence stood nearby, feeling the stark contrast in service. The couple was given attention, while he, another potential customer, was completely overlooked. A sinking feeling rose in Terence's chest. He couldn't help but notice the blatant discrimination taking place in the very store he had built. He didn't want to rush to conclusions, but the truth was so glaring that he couldn't ignore it. Terence began to feel a deep sense of disappointment. He decided to try a different approach. This time, he walked over to the home goods section, hoping for a different experience. However, the waiting and the indifference of the staff remained unchanged. He began to feel as though he was no longer the founder of the company. At this moment, he was just a customer, an overlooked customer, treated with indifference, and it didn't feel right. This feeling made Terence question whether his company still upheld the values he had set from the very beginning. He began to reassess everything. Was this lack of fairness a consequence of the company growing too fast, causing him to become too detached from reality? Had he been overlooking the importance of maintaining the core values within his company? Terence continued to check other sections of the store and, by chance, encountered another situation that left him stunned. This time, he decided to enter the home goods section, where kitchen and household products were displayed. Terence noticed an employee standing near the kitchen counter, but she completely ignored him. Even when he approached and asked about a product, her response was brief and devoid of any enthusiasm. "What do you want? Everything here is clearly priced on the shelf," she said, with no interest whatsoever. At this point, Terence began to feel a growing frustration. He couldn't understand how an employee could behave this way, especially in a store that belonged to his own company. This indifference wasn't just a personal issue with one employee. It was a sign of a deeper cultural problem within the company. What made Terence even more disappointed was when he accidentally overheard a conversation between two employees in the kitchen section. They were talking about him, unaware that he was the CEO of the company. One of them said, "Look at him, he's probably just here to look around. People like him can't afford to buy anything in this section." Those words made Terence's heart sink. He couldn't believe he was being treated this way, not for any reason other than his appearance. He realized that the issue wasn't just about a few unprofessional employees. It was a misguided culture that had existed within his company all along. Fortunately, not all of Terence's experiences were negative. When he walked through the clothing section, he met an employee named Denise who was incredibly warm and attentive. Denise greeted him with a bright smile and asked how she could assist him. When Terence asked for help, she was patient, explained the product details thoroughly, and even helped him find the right size. Denise's attitude gave Terence a glimmer of hope, showing him that not all employees lacked respect and professionalism. However, the contrast between Denise and the other employees made Terence even more worried. This stark difference highlighted that the problem wasn't a lack of skills, but rather a much bigger issue concerning the company's culture and the way employees were being trained. After a long day of witnessing unexpected experiences in his own store, Terence felt a deep sense of disappointment. What he had discovered was not just a few unprofessional employees, but a widespread issue with the company's culture that he had overlooked during its expansion. His company, which was built on values of respect and fairness, seemed to be losing sight of those very principles. Terence sat in his car, silently reflecting on everything that had happened. He couldn't deny that he had been overlooked, discriminated against, and even disrespected, simply because of how the employees judged him based on his appearance. This truly pained him, but it also served as a wake-up call. He knew he couldn't allow this to continue. His company needed to return to the values it once stood for. These values weren't just empty promises in a handbook. They had to be demonstrated every day, through the actions of every employee. And he, the founder of the company, needed to set the example, not just in words, but in concrete actions. This was the moment he had to face the uncomfortable truth and decide that change would come from the roots. The next day, Terence returned to the store. This time, he was no longer a customer, but the CEO of the company. He demanded to meet with the store manager and all the employees for an urgent meeting. When Brian, the store manager, walked into the room, he appeared surprised and a bit anxious. Terence didn't want to make anyone feel attacked, but he had to make it clear that what had happened was unacceptable. "Brian, I'm Terence Hall," he said calmly, looking straight into the manager's eyes. "And yesterday I came to this store as a customer. What I witnessed yesterday deeply disappointed me. I'm not just the CEO, I'm the founder of this company. And what I saw was a clear display of disrespect that I cannot tolerate." Brian seemed nervous, but tried to maintain a professional demeanor. He apologized and assured Terence that he would find a way to fix the issue. But Terence knew that a mere apology wasn't enough. Action had to be taken immediately. It's not just a few employees, Brian. This is a problem with the entire company culture. We need to do something right now to change this. If we don't act, the company won't survive long with attitudes like this. At the end of the meeting, Terence outlined specific changes. He decided that it wouldn't be enough just to reprimand the employees. He needed to create a comprehensive training program for all employees across the company. This program would focus on educating staff about respecting customers, fairness, and maintaining the values his company had built from the beginning. We will start a new training course for all employees on how to treat customers with respect, without discrimination, Terence said during the meeting. We will teach them about diversity, acceptance, and respecting people from all different backgrounds. Every employee needs to understand that they are not just salespeople. They are representatives of this company, and their actions will impact our image. Terence also decided to conduct unannounced store visits to ensure that this culture was upheld in every store of the company. He wanted to continue witnessing and directly checking the attitudes of the staff to ensure that these changes were not just empty words, but real change. We need to work to recreate a work environment where everyone feels valued, no matter who they are. And if we can't do that, we won't be able to continue growing. At the end of the meeting, Terence felt a sense of relief. He had made a decision and taken action. But he knew that change couldn't happen overnight. It would take time, patience, and continuous effort from everyone in the company. As he walked out of the store, Terence took a final glance behind him. He no longer saw just a store. He saw an opportunity to make a change, to rebuild the values he had forgotten. He realized that his company was not just a place that sold products, but a place that created relationships, where every customer felt respected and valued. I started this company because I believed in one thing. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly and with respect, Terence reminded himself. And today I will do everything to make sure that all my employees understand this, because only when we do things right will the company truly succeed. With that thought in mind, Terence got into his car and drove away from the store for the last time. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that if he could change the company's culture, if he could ensure every customer was treated fairly, it would be a great victory.